Hello everyone and welcome back to another pre-recorded lesson video. Today is March 30th. Y'all are probably going to be watching this on March 31st. We are on lesson 5 today. So we are zooming through. Make sure that you watch the lesson videos for lesson 1 through 5 or lesson 1 through 4. I've noticed that a lot of you aren't attending the virtual class, which is fine. As long as you're watching the lesson videos, but the views on the lesson videos aren't the greatest, right? It seems like a couple of you are slacking a little bit, and I promise you by the time it gets to the point where y'all have to take the 3-week, 6-week, 9-week test, it is going to catch up to you. The ones that are consistently watching the videos will do great on them. The ones who aren't will struggle, right? So please make sure that you are watching the videos. I will be sending a message out to y'all and to your homes, to your guardians later on today to remind y'all, because we need to finish strong so we can make sure that y'all pass and go on to 9th grade. Report cards are out. It is on your home access center, so please look out for that. If you are failing, please make sure you get with your teachers to make sure that you catch up on your grades, right? Because we can't have y'all fail and then repeat 8th grade next year, okay? But the welcome activity for lesson 5 is this quote: Claudette Colvin is a change agent. Y'all might not have heard of the word change agent. I know y'all have heard of the word agency because we focused on that quite a bit in the third 9 weeks, right? The difference between fate and agency. Agency basically means that you have the choice in the actions that you take, or you have options, right? It is your decision, the course that you want to go on, right? You're the one that gets to decide that. So whenever it says Claudette Colvin is a change agent, an agent is another word for agency. That's basically telling us that Claudette as a change agent, because she acted in a way that used the most decision-making power in her situations, right? Claudette has the ability and understanding to make a decision. And we see that in today's lesson, in today's chapter, which is chapter 4. We're finally going to get into the conflict of her on the bus and the decisions that she makes in order to create change, right? Because she decides to take a stand, and no one else decided that for her but her, okay? So why is it important to discuss agency when talking about injustice? Because remember, injustice means something that is not right or something that's not fair. If something that's not right or fair is happening to you, wouldn't you want the ability and the choices, the power to make a change and fight against that, right? If something bad is happening to you and you don't have an option of changing that, then you're not going to be very happy with that outcome, right? But everyone has a choice. Everyone has the opportunity to fight against anything bad that is happening to them. And we get to see that with Claudette and her agency, her choices that she makes, okay? So the focusing question still is what motivated Claudette Colvin, and we're really going to get into that today. We got into that a little bit yesterday with chapter 3. And the content framing question for lesson 5 is, what is the central idea of chapter 4? We are going into chapter 4 today, and as always, please make sure that you are keeping up with the reading videos, because I promise you, you will need to know what is happening in the book to pass those tests, okay? It's going to be bad if you did great the first 3, 9 weeks, right? You do great, and then you slip up in the last 9 weeks, and you end up failing a course, right? So please make sure that you are keeping up with this. And then the goal for lesson 5 is analyze how Claudette's stand against injustice develops a central idea. Claudette Colvin, twice toward justice. Remember, central idea is another term for theme. Right? How does that develop a theme in the book? But yeah, let's get into chapter 4. And remember, as always, I am uploading that read aloud video in today's folder, which is should be the 331 folder. So please, please, please watch that. I'm pretty sure this is the shortest chapter in the book. We are almost halfway done with this book, which is pretty great since this is only the second week of school, right? So watch that. Take a break from this video to go watch that currently. But moving on, this is basically a timeline of events of what happened that day, right? The day was March 2nd, 1955. It was a Wednesday. And this is the day that Claudette decides to take a stand and sort of spark the civil rights movement, right, to end segregation and racism in the deep, deep South. So the events, first, Claudette gets out of school early and gets on the bus. The bus fills up and a white woman expects Claudette to give up her seat. The bus driver tells Claudette, you got to get up, but she stays, right? Those are the first three events. Claudette gets out of school and gets on the bus. She's with her classmates. The bus fills up, and a white woman expects Claudette to give up her seat, right? Because that was custom back then. The bus driver tells Claudette, you got to get up, but she decides to stay, okay? She didn't have to get up, right? There was a law or city ordinance in Alabama at that time that was put into effect in 1900 that states that no passenger on a bus has to legally give up their seat if there are other empty seats on the bus, right? And there were other empty seats on the bus, but the white woman expected Claudette to get up. But Claudette had a legal right to sit there. The Jim Crow laws on the bus were not laws. They were custom. They were tradition. People have done it for so long that they got used to it. But there was no legal law that stated that Claudette had to get up, right? There was actually, before you move on, there was actually a quote in the chapter 4 where someone from the back supports Claudette and says, she doesn't have to do anything except be black and die. There's only one guarantee that you have in this life is that everyone eventually dies, right? So that's what that person is saying. She doesn't have to do anything, right? There's no guarantees in life. There's no such thing as you have to do this except eventually die and be the race that you were born, right? That's what the person in the back was essentially saying. Next, after the bus driver tells Claudette to get up, transit police, like the bus police, get on the bus and order Claudette to move. She stays seated and silent. The transit police leave because they don't have the authority to arrest her, right? Claudette doesn't respond to the bus driver at all. She doesn't respond to the transit police. She just sits down on that bus and she basically says, enough is enough. I'm fighting. This is what I'm going to do. But she's saying that all in her head. She just remains quiet the entire time. Next, the bus stops at Bibb and Commerce Streets, and 2 policemen get on. All right, you can still visit those streets now if you're ever in Montgomery, Alabama. After the 2 policemen get on, police arrest Claudette and carry her off while she shouts, it's my constitutional right. It's my constitutional right. She's basically saying it is my right, my legal right to be able to sit on this bus wherever I want and not move for anybody, right? It's my constitutional right. The police don't even tell her that she's under arrest at all. Okay, they just grab her by her arms, yank her off, and essentially harass her. The police eventually take Claudette to the city jail instead of juvie for adults and put her in a cell without a phone call. That is illegal. Whenever people are arrested, they are legally allowed to make 1 phone call. That is their legal right to get that. They took that away from Claudette. It is also known as your Miranda rights as well. You have the right to remain silent, right? You don't have to respond to anybody. You have the right to attorney. If you can't afford an attorney, one will be given to you. And you have the right to a phone call, okay? Remember, you have to know your constitutional rights. You never know when it could help you out in the future, okay? Claudette knew her constitutional rights. She knew that she was allowed to sit anywhere on the bus. It didn't say there was a law that outlawed that. And lastly, Claudette's mother and pastor, Reverend H.H. Johnson, bailed Claudette out of jail and bring her home. The only reason her mother knew that Claudette was in jail was because of her classmates and neighbors on the bus. Since she wasn't allowed a phone call, she wasn't allowed to tell her mother, right? So if the classmates and neighbors went on the bus, there's a big chance that Claudette's mother doesn't find out until way later, right? So the central idea of this book, and essentially chapter 4, that timeline basically just summarizes exactly what happens in chapter 4. This quote in page 32 says, I hadn't planned it out, but my decision was built on a lifetime of nasty experiences. How has Claudette's action been developing up to this point? What motivates Claudette to make this decision to stay in her seat? Whenever something is bothering you and you don't say it immediately, sometimes it builds on each other, right? It just builds and builds, your anger builds and builds until you finally reach a breaking point, right? For Claudette, it was the same thing. She's been experiencing racism her entire life, ever since she was a kid up until now when she's 15. So all of this anger and just frustration has been building and building and building on top of each other. And she's remained quiet even through the death of Jeremiah Reeves and everything else. She's remained quiet up to this point. And now she has finally reached her breaking point, right? So everything has been building up to this moment of March 2nd, 1955. And she finally breaks. She finally decides to fight back, right? Finally decides to fight back because she realizes this is my constitutional right. I have a right to sit here in this seat. You don't have a right to tell me to move, right? Next quote is, that was the whole point of the segregation rules. It was all symbolic. Blacks had to be behind whites. Symbolism, or a symbol, is something that sort of represents a whole thing or a movement or any institution. Like the symbol for religion most of the times is a cross. The symbol for medicine or hospitals or anything is also like that short little cross, right? The symbol for segregation, or the symbol for segregation on the buses, was the fact that black people had to sit in the back of the bus behind the whites. It was essentially always saying that you are never going to be able to catch up to us. You will always be behind us. You will always be less than us. So the seating was symbolic of the segregation and the rule and the racism of that time, of people saying the white people will always be ahead of everybody else, right? So Claudette's stand, a response to the symbolic aspects of segregation, she finally stood up against everybody, right? She finally stood up, sat in the middle of the bus, and said, I'm not moving for anybody. Okay? Next, we're going to go into some vocab words. A rebellion is a resistance against authority, such as a government, or against what is considered confining. Sometimes y'all rebel whenever you tell me that you don't want to do work. You're rebelling against me, right? A sentence example in the book is, rebellion was on my mind that day. What Claudette did on that bus was a rebellion. She resisted against the bus driver, resisted against the police officers, resisted against the whole institution of racism and segregation, right? Rebellion was on her mind that day. Next is a revolution. A revolution is a massive change in beliefs and approaches of doing things, or the transformation that is a result of a major upheaval. The sentence example is, and I think you just brought the revolution to Montgomery. They're very similar in terms of definitions. The difference is you can have a rebellion without a revolution. A rebellion is you resisting against authority or an institution. You're essentially fighting. A revolution is a successful rebellion. You overturn or change what you are fighting against. So, a rebellion, you can have a rebellion without a revolution, right? You can rebel against something and still lose and not change anything. A revolution, you can think of it as a successful rebellion. You fight, you win, you change it, right? A good example is the American Revolution, right? The British saw the American colonies fighting against them as a rebellion. They're fighting, they're resisting against us. The Americans saw it as a revolution. The American colonies wanted to defeat the British and create their own government, right? They wanted to overturn and change the government, right? A good example is Claudette fighting on the bus is a rebellion. The civil rights movement is a revolution against the institution of segregation, right? So how do Claudette's actions develop from rebellion to revolution? So Claudette rebels on the bus. She doesn't move. She gets arrested. She rebels, she fights. This sparks the civil rights movement, which is a revolution. They changed the laws of segregation, right? So they rebelled, they were successful, they changed it. So she finally, Claudette, whenever she stands up, she finally shows people that she's serious. Whenever Jeremiah Reeves gets arrested in chapter 3, Claudette fights, right? She attends rallies, she marches, she speaks out for and support of Jeremiah Reeves. But her finally making a stand on the bus shows people that she's serious about making change. And the community rallies behind her. They show her support. This is the start of a revolution, is getting people on your side and supporting you, right? So Claudette rebels, and other people start to see, okay, she's serious about it. Maybe we help her out. That is the start of a revolution. It's a group of people trying to fight back against an institution or a government, okay? So this, from page 34 to 36, is Claudette's stand against injustice. It is a difference of Claudette's own account of what happened and the official police report that the Montgomery police officers wrote after they arrested Claudette. So, in Claudette's point of view, the police grabbed Claudette and pulled her off the bus. The police officers wrote that the police told Claudette she was under arrest. Claudette says that never happened, right? They never told her that she was under arrest. They just grabbed her and yanked her. Claudette says she was limp like a baby and she did not resist arrest. She says the word specifically, she went limp like a baby and I was too smart to fight back. Because if she fought back, right, and tried to hit him and anything like that, they could do a lot worse to her, right? They could beat her up, they could kill her, right, and they would be justified. They wouldn't get in trouble for it. So Claudette says she was limp like a baby and she did not resist or fight against the arrest. The police report says Claudette struggled off the bus. If you listen to the pre-recording, if you listen to the Read Aloud video, chapter 4, or read chapter 4 yourself, you'll realize Claudette always says she does not fight back. She does say that she may have accidentally scratched one of the police officers because she had long nails, but she says it was on an accident. The police report says that Claudette kicked and scratched the police officers on purpose. Claudette again says she did not fight back. She was too smart to fight back, right? The police officer says Claudette kicked one of the officers in the stomach, right? And they say when they were trying to drag her into the car, she was kicking them and scratching them. And Claudette says she went peacefully to the car, and after they got into the car, the police officers harassed her. They were asking about her bra size. She was afraid that she was going to get raped by them. So it was completely different accounts of what happened. Right? Claudette has a completely different story. The police have a completely different story, but they're both about the same event, right? They're two completely different accounts. And what's terrifying is that police back then had the power to lie and get away with it because the system of segregation and Jim Crow supported and benefited the white people. And majority of police back then were white. Okay, I would say all police back then in Montgomery at that time was white. Okay, so the police had the power to lie and do anything they wanted without trouble. And this was terrifying because if the people that are paid to protect you from harm are corrupt and they're able to lie and get away with it, who's there to protect you then? If the people that are paid to protect you don't protect you and they're the ones causing you harm, who's there to protect you then? Right? That is terrifying for Claudette and her community and any other person of color living in the South back then. Because they didn't have any power. The police had the power. And they were corrupt. Right? So this sort of shows that. The differences between their accounts. Conducting research. We're going to ignore that slide for now. It's basically just research questions. If you had to do a research question about Booker T. Washington, that's who Claudette's high school is named after, you would have to brainstorm a list of questions first, right? If you want to write a paper about Booker T. Washington, you would need to brainstorm a list of questions first. And a couple questions would probably be like, why was Booker T. Washington important during the time he lived in? Booker T. Washington was a civil rights activist. He was a advisor to many presidents. He was born in the time of slavery, but he was one of the biggest influential figures in American history and Black history. Okay. Studying a figure like Booker T. Washington really help you understand Claudette Colvin and her motivations, because Claudette says that she was inspired by a lot of other strong African Americans back then. And some of the questions that you may have to think about is just like, why was Booker T. Washington important? What did he do? What was his life like? Right? Just some basic questions about it. But that's it for this lesson. It's really chapter 4 and the actual event of Claudette fighting back. If you have any questions about this lesson, please let me know. But if not, that is it for this lesson video, and I will see you here for the next one. Bye.